Thank you. So I am Leonardo Vallini from the University of Mainz. However, the work that I am presenting today, was carried out at the University of Padua, where I used to work until a few months ago. So as you all know, Homo sapiens is an African species, and the ancestors of all modern-day non-Africans migrated out of Africa between 70 and 60,000 years ago. Shortly after, they had mixed with Neanderthals. However, the divergence between Eastern and Western Eurasians did not take place until around 45,000 years ago. Now, that means that for around 15,000 years, the ancestors of all modern-day Eurasians were part of a single population living somewhere on the new continent, and we started to call this population the hub. Now, I will reiterate once more that I'm not speaking of all Homo sapiens that ever lived outside of Africa, but only of those that left a genetic legacy behind, either in modern population or in ancient population that we managed to sequence. And it's, of course, not clear where the hub was located and how then the broader colonization of Eurasia occurred starting from it. The second question we tried to answer in a paper that we published 2 years ago, in which very briefly we suggested that the broader colonization of Eurasia took place by means of repeated, and in particular at least 3 expansions from the hub that are chronologically, genetically and culturally distinct. And in particular, we have an early one that reaches Central Europe that later became extinct, another massive one that reached all of Eurasia, and while it thrived in East Eurasia, it later became extinct or largely extinct in Europe and was later replaced by a final expansion that recolonized an almost empty Europe. But we did not answer to the question of where the hub was located, and that's what we try to do in this research. So let me introduce you to these 2 very important individuals, Kostenki 14 and Tianyuan. These 2 individuals are the 2 oldest unadmixed representatives of the last 2 waves that I just described, and are also the oldest East Eurasian and the oldest West Eurasian that is also genetically West Eurasian. We looked at these 2 individuals, and we looked at the derived allele sharing of each other individuals and populations with these 2 individuals. The derived allele sharing is the proportion of derived alleles with a set individual that another individual possesses. And in a way, it's a measure of the shared evolutionary drift with Kostenki or Tianyuan. Why did we choose this metric? Well, the reason is that in a reference space that is defined by the derived allele sharing with Kostenki, or K, and the derived allele sharing with Tianyuan, or T, it is possible to predict which would be the location of the hub population. And that's exactly here, at the intercept of these blue and red lines. Unadmixed descendants of the blue expansion, the one of which Kostenki was part, would be somewhere here along this line, while unadmixed descendants of the red expansion would be along here. So that seems very easy. We just need to measure these metrics for all available population, and we see which ones fall closer to this place. Well, it's not that easy, because human population do not stay put in a certain place. We like to move, and we also like to do something else that results in admixed population. The K and T coordinates of an admixed population would be the mean of the K and T coordinates of the source population, weighted by the contribution that each source population gives to the admixed population. There is, however, one more problem, and these are the so-called basal Eurasians. Basal Eurasians are what geneticists call a ghost population. It means that we have not sequenced them yet, but we know that they must have existed, because otherwise we cannot explain the genetic relatedness between different populations. So their existence was suggested in 2014 by Josif Lazaridis, who said that they were a population that diverged from other Eurasians before the admixture with Neanderthals, so that means before the divergence between East and West Eurasians. And later on, starting from 25, 20, at least 1,000 years ago, they had mixed with the West Eurasians in the Middle East. Later on, however, the Neolithic Revolution exported this ancestry from the Middle East towards all the rest of West Eurasia, to the point that today there is no West Eurasian population that lacks the admixture with this group. And since their split time from other Eurasian is deeper, their position in this plot will be somewhere around here. And that complicates things because now every observed population that we can measure could be an admixture of these three sources. By making some assumptions and some approximations, we managed to develop an analytical method to identify the source populations starting from the observed one, and then to also measure how close they are to the hub. But we needed to check whether our approach worked. So to do so, we used some coalescent simulations. These are a genetic technique in which you can simulate some genomes under a predefined demographic model that I define, and so I know everything about it. We simulated West Eurasians, East Eurasians, and Basal Eurasian, and we used these populations, we mixed them in different proportion, and then we tried to apply our method to them. Without using the truth that we know, we had to use all the same approximations and assumptions that we used for the real world, but we could use then the truth to check whether we were doing a good job. So we repeated the approach many and many times over different simulations, and by simulating different source populations with differential affinities to the hub, and then we carried out all possible pairwise comparisons to see whether we were able to retrieve the correct ranking of source population. And it seems like we can, because unless the source populations for which we are trying to make the inference constitutes less than 50% of the ancestry of the observed population, then we are able to obtain reliable results. And we also tested that our approach is robust to alternative population model. So let's take a look at the real data. When we plot modern population inside the reference space that's defined by the derived allele sharing with Kostenki and Tianyuan, we have a situation like that. We have pre-Ice Age Europeans here, East Asians are up here, and these two kind of correspond to the red and blue dots in the dummy plot a few slides back, and then all this space in the middle that's occupied by other population, both ancient and modern. We then applied our method, now that we know it works, to these populations, and we identified the areas that are more likely to be the location of the hub. Here in the map in light color, we see the areas that are close to a lot of population that are inferred to be close to the hub genetically. And as you can see, the Middle East is quite a good spot, and in particular the area in the Persian plateau. And for the few geneticists that are here, in particular, we find high values in the population that are carrying an ancestry that's commonly known as Iran hunter-gatherer or Iran Neolithic. We didn't stop here though, we also had a look into paleoclimate because we wanted to verify whether the area that we had identified with genetics was actually inhabitable by humans during that time frame, and also to potentially refine our inference by excluding certain areas that might not have been very suitable for human occupation. To do that, we have built some species distribution model using the Max-Ent algorithm. So we started from paleoclimatic variables, and we took the data of the occurrences of Homo sapiens sites. We combined them to obtain the species distribution model, which gave us, which allowed us to identify areas that were suitable for human occupation. Then we used the relation that exists between the net primary productivity of a certain area and the density of hunter-gatherer population to compute the carrying capacity of different areas. These are the data that we used, the occurrence of Homo sapiens sites between 70 and 30,000 years ago in Eurasia, and the paleoclimatic variables. In this dataset that we used, we have records every 2,000 years. So between 70 and 30,000 years ago, we have 21 time intervals. And here are the results of our habitat suitability model. They are all combined. So for the 21 time intervals of our inference, we have darker color if a certain part of the map is inferred to be inhabitable throughout all the 21 time intervals, and lighter shades of gray if it's just inhabitable for a shorter period of time. And as you can see, large parts of the Persian plateau are either always or often inhabitable by Homo sapiens. These are the results for the carrying capacity. The Persian plateau is in dark green. And even though there is a decrease at some point, we see that the carrying capacity is always on par with other regions in the Middle East, and for the majority of the time it's actually higher. We then combined our two inferences together. This is the map that we saw a few slides ago with the inference based on genetics, where the light yellow was genetically closer to the hub and the red was more distant to the hub, and where we excluded the areas that are deemed not suitable for human occupation throughout at least 90% of the time intervals. So as you can see, there is the area in and around the Persian plateau, excluding the central Iranian desert, parts of Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf that back then was not submerged. And so taking into account the genetics and paleoclimatic inferences, that's our best guess for the location that might have been the home of Homo sapiens between the out of Africa and the broader colonization of Eurasia. Now, this answers some questions, of course, but there are many that are still open. Primarily, what could be the reason for this delay after the out of Africa between the broader colonization of Eurasia? We don't know for sure. Hypotheses could be made, though. It is possible that we needed some time to recover demographically from the bottleneck after the out of Africa. It is possible that there was some competition with Neanderthals, for example, or maybe we needed to adapt either biologically or culturally to the new environment. It's also possible that paleoclimate, again, could have played a role, because you might have noticed in the plots of the carrying capacity that the carrying capacity of the Persian plateau goes down after 60,000 years ago. That's not so much because of a decrease in the net primary productivity, but it's because of a restriction of the areas that were potentially inhabitable. Now, this area restrict, there is less interconnection between areas that are suitable for human occupation there, and the habitat becomes more fragmented. After 50,000 years ago, this starts to go up again. New areas become connected, potentially opening up for the possibility to colonize the rest of Eurasia. And finally, it's, I think, very intriguing to notice that after 50,000 years ago, there is really a sprawling of new lithic technocomplexes appearing all over Eurasia, as we have heard in many of the presentations during these last days. And it's, I think, very intriguing to wonder whether there was a causal effect between the two things and which direction it was. So is it that the development of new cultural innovation allows expansions and the colonization of new areas? Or is it that the attempt to colonize new areas triggers the necessity to develop new cultural innovation. These are, in my opinion, the most important questions that we still did not manage to answer, but that hopefully over the next year could be clearer. And I would like to finish by thanking all the people that contributed to this research and you for your kind attention.